In a recent video, you'll see me playing a song on this ridiculous contraption. I want to thank Vectric very much for sponsoring my insanity. I could not have done these builds without them, not just the software, but also their support. So thank you very much, Vectric, for that. This video is going to show you how I built it. I'm not going to go into total detail of every step of it because a lot of it is covered in another video I've done of a similar guitar, which I'll link to at the end. And then at the end of this video, I'm going to talk about some of the things that went wrong and some of the things I would do different or better if I were to do something this ridiculous again, or if you were so inclined to do it, I'll maybe save you some trouble. It's still a prototype, you know. So I'll see you at the end and we'll talk. All right, check it out. I have a big stash of that Kumaru decking that I got from an old customer, and I thought it would make good wood for guitars because it's a hardwood. It's from South America. So here I am just cleaning it up and getting it, you know, prepared. There's contractor's glue on it and a few nails you have to remove. Pretty much basic reclaiming here. And then I glued the pieces up into the larger size blanks that I would need to cut my guitars out. At the same time I was working on this project, I was working on a table made from some locally milled ash. And I had the ash was 8/4 thick when I got it, but I really only needed it to be about 1 1/4 inches thick, so I shaved off these tops. And I took all these cutoffs and I used them to make a veneer to thicken up the body of the guitar. The Kumaru is only about 1 inch thick, so I want my guitars to be about 1.5 inches, and it worked out perfectly to do this sort of two-toned top thing. So now after I've glued up these blocks, I kind of worked them back down together again and then applied that ash veneer on top of the Kumaru. I thought the reason we got CNCs is so we don't have to do any real woodworking, right? Doing something wrong. I then glued the ash tops to the Kumaru using pretty much every clamp I have in the shop. There's the magic of editing for you, and then it was back to making these one singular block of wood again, getting them all nice and level and square for the CNC machine. Now onto the CNC work. I designed this in Aspire, but you don't need Aspire to do any of this project. It's all VCarve compatible. One thing that's nice about the version 9 for both Aspire and VCarve is this two-sided file creating, so you can do it in one file instead of two separate files. Now, and then the rest of it is really just these simple vectors that you can do in just about anything. And all of my files are available for free download at vectric.com. There's a link in the description below. Pay close attention to those 3 holes outside the body of the guitar. Those are the dowel position marker holes, so I drill them into the block of wood and then I drill them right into the wasteboard of my CNC machine in reverse, so when I flip it upside down and I put a little dowel into those holes, it guarantees that that board is lined up in the same place. I'm using just an old pencil that was pretty much done as my dowel markers, but now by having those holes in there and having them in a random position, there's only one way you can put the board back onto the CNC machine, and that is the correct way. I just recently learned this and I think it's fantastic. You still have to screw the board down to keep it from moving around and stuff, or do some other clamping system, but you're guaranteed perfect alignment, and it's been working for me, and I don't even know what I'm doing, and it's working for me. So then it was just really a matter of cutting out all the files. Cutting out these pre-made heads on the CNC is a little bit tricky. You have to set up your start point at the top instead of the bottom because I don't have a square line here. And there's also the matter of how you're going to hold it down. So I don't want to do tabs, I want to cut the thing out. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to do the engraving in it, and I'm going to drill a couple holes and just screw this thing down to the board. Next I'm going to drill my holes that are going to hold the tuners that are going to go in it. Once those holes are drilled, I'm going to stop it, and then I'm going to use washers and screws through those holes to hold the neck down. And then I can, when it cuts the final profile out and separates from the outside, nothing's going to move. was off a little bit. I should have drawn the file down, but I would rather make this mistake than cut into there, so I'll cut that out with a handsaw and then clean it all up. I cut the cavity covers out of an old vinyl record, which is like my favorite thing to do, is kind of my signature. And you'll see that I drew the record into my template so I would know how much label I'm cutting and how much I'm not. And you also see that I follow the bit around as it cuts because it's real easy for that to just sort of catch the record and break it. So if I just add a little pressure as it goes around, it keeps it nice and still. This is just the classic V-carve spray paint fill. I created this template on the CNC to help me set up my router table for how far and deep I need to cut the slot for the T-track and the body, but you really could just measure it and do it. It's not that big of a deal. And now the trick here is that this T-track goes into the sides of the body of the guitar, and that's the whole key to this convertible or Multitar, whatever I'm calling it now. It's just that you can then use this T-track to slide parts in and out. If you watch the other video I made about this style, it goes into a little more detail about how all this works, but I think you'll figure it out here. It's not that complicated. After the epoxy set, I added the screws to the screw holes in there as well for some extra security, and then I just had to round over the aluminum to make it match the profile of the instrument. I put a slight round over on all the exterior edges of the guitar parts, being very careful not to do that to the main body in the center or any of the parts that connect to the center, because they all need to appear to be flush. And then the most nerve-wracking thing of every build is drilling that hole to run the wires from the pickup into the cavity. You're always afraid you're going to miss, but it was pretty easy on this one. The first time I made a guitar like this, I had made two templates. I made this one, which I still used to set up the router, and then I made this template, the idea being you would line it up against the body and just mark the holes where you would drill for your bolts to go into the track that slide. And it was less than perfect. It didn't quite work good, and so I ended up with the guitar being just a little bit crooked, and I didn't like that, so I decided this is a simpler way. I just have these dowel center finders. When I put those, they fit right into the track, so I can put those where I want them, and then I can just squeeze these two together and just get a nice perfect spot. So that means every piece, if there's a little bit of an imperfection or something, I got it on a piece of plywood so they're all flat together, and I can just sort of get a better fit. Oops. So you can see I have a hole here and there. I used my square to help make sure my drill bit was straight as I drilled holes to insert these threaded inserts into the body. Now I'm going to thread in hex bolts into there that will fit into the T-track, but I'm actually going to round over the heads of the bolts before I put them in. It just makes it easier to attach the different parts of the instrument. I also put rare earth magnets in the butt ends of the wings that attach on, as well as the main body of the instrument, and this helps secure the connection and keep it still. And if you watch the other video I made about the similar guitar to this, there's a little more detail. I add a little bit of thread locker to the bolts as I put them into the inserts, and then I set them to the exact height that I want them so they slide into the track and lock, and they're not too tight, not too loose. Now I finished it with some linseed oil, and then once that dried all out for a couple days, I sprayed a little bit of lacquer on top and assembled the instrument. I can't stress enough how important it is to really take your time measuring your layout and getting everything all just right when you're doing these final assemblies, because just a little bit off and everything feels way off when you're making a guitar. Here's where it starts getting weird. The idea of the instrument was it was a guitar, bass, and drums was the hardest part to try and make. I decided to make like a cajon, like a mini cajon with 2 chambers on it, a bass drum chamber and a snare drum chamber. I thought that would be the easiest way to get some kind of halfway decent drum sounds out of this guitar. I used some reclaimed pine and my favorite, the old door skins from the hollow core doors, to create this hollow box that is in the shape of a guitar, an Explorer body. And it worked okay. I mean, I don't know too much about making drums. I've only made a couple cajons and I made a few wooden bongos in my day. And this doesn't sound as good as any of those, but it does function. At the end of the video I talk about some of the things that I might do different next time. This is what I did. I would like to also make a mandolin or a ukulele that I could slide into that position on the guitar, so I could pull the drums out and then slide in another stringed instrument someday. That is on my short list, and if anybody's interested in seeing that, let me know. I sort of built out the sides of this drum box like an acoustic guitar. I added some thin white oak strips that were somewhat malleable so I could bend them to the contours of the shape. It's not just a straight line going across. And I used a little bit of guitar kerfing, which is probably overkill and unnecessary because they're not these super sharp curves. I probably could have just glued in little tabs or strips, but I did it anyways because I had some to just sort of support that inside. And you'll see I put some solid wood in the corners as well. Here's that kerfing I was talking about. And so that's how I built out the whole bottom. I wanted to make the top removable so I could do work and change and modify it because I knew I wouldn't be happy right off the bat. But here I am just using a flush trim router to make it all even. So now once I've got this whole back and body set up and I have the air ports on it, I created the wooden top to fit. I followed the same procedure as I did on the bottom, however, I did not glue the top on. It's all attached with screws so I can open it and access the inside of the drum. I popped out a couple cymbals, I guess you'd call them, from a tambourine, and I cut up a drumstick as some spacers. Then I pulled this old broken snare drum off the side of the road in the junk pile, and I had some other drums with it too. I cut the snare off of it, cut the snare in half, and stuck that into the other side, sort of proud and sticking up so the wood is really forced down over it, and it has to hit it when I tap on it. Now that was the basic idea, and here is the end result in all of its different variations, and obviously because of this design it is expandable and customizable way beyond what I've done already. If you haven't seen the performance video, check that out and you can see it in action. Okay, so now that you've seen all of that stuff, really there's a lot going on here, more than I could ever talk about in one video. There's plenty of other videos about making guitars, and I'm just trying to show this one ridiculous idea. So, first off, the cajon is, you know, I mean, it's not as nice sounding as a good cajon because it's small, and I thought that having these tambourine parts in here I'd be able to get some nice jingle, but it doesn't work too well. If I were to do it again, I would probably do a lot different about this. I might make it more like a bongo instead of a cajon. I just wish I had more low end. The bass, there's a couple things I did wrong on this. You see the bridge is kind of hanging off the edge here a little bit. I was trying to keep this as compact as possible, and so I really pushed the neck in deep into the body and kept the body short. And I thought I was going to be okay, but I really should have had the neck back another inch, or I should have made the body an inch bigger. But I wanted to keep this as small and light as possible because I knew there'd be a lot of stress on my back as well as the guitar. Other than that, I'm really happy with the bass guitar, and now that it's done, I'm going to put strap holders here so I can just use it as a bass guitar like it is, and maybe create some other type of thing that I could snap into this here to fill it out as a bass guitar, because it's actually a pretty fun and cool bass guitar. But what would be cool to do is to do magnetic connectors like you have for your laptop power cord, and potentially have a magnetic connection, so when you slide it in now, the two instruments, you don't need two separate cords. and they could be, you know, working through the same electronic system. There's potential for stuff like that in the other build too, where I had these sliding things, so you could actually have additional features electronically slide on as well. This cord here, it was hanging down and it would get in the way, so I ended up putting a wire holder on the back here and just basically permanently attaching the cord there to keep it out of the way. I had to put the strap lock there. I had to get all this stuff out of the way so I could very quickly slide these parts on and off. So if I were to design this again, I would probably make the jack here in the end and then leave a little more space here so there'd be room for it to go right around the cord. On this instrument, you can see I actually kind of broke the butt end of this already because I didn't leave enough wood, you know, the end grain of this wood. It just, you can see it broke. Could have done something better with that. I'm going to have to fix that. But the T-Track system works fairly well. It works great for the drum and for these lighter pieces. And the magnets obviously don't work as well now because this broke. You can see here I messed up on my CNC file. Obviously I messed up this radius somehow. It's the only one that doesn't fit. I don't know what happened. I must have hit Apple Z or something in the wrong time, but we have a nice tight fit there, and here it doesn't fit, and I just didn't bother going in to cut another piece. The drum fits great, you know, so that was just a mistake, human error. But you see the drum really fits nicely. Yeah, so those are some of the things that went wrong and some of the things that went right. It's a success. It works. Could it be better? Yes. I'm going to do more experimentation with this type of thing. I'm interested in just not so much the multi-instrument stuff, but just the functionality of removing a lot of this material and doing some different things with the body is a lot of fun for me. And some different materials, of course. So I'm sure you'll be seeing many more guitar builds from me on this channel. And again, I'm not too interested in making like cigar box guitars and one-string things and two-string things. I like making traditional instruments that sort of adheres to that that language, and I don't really know why I'm so kind of bent on that, because usually I'm pretty non-traditional as I am. I think it's because if I'm making these non-traditional instruments, I want to add that traditional element to them of like, well, this is a regular scale, a regular style guitar. Even though it's so non-traditional, anyone can play it. You don't have to learn a new instrument. I guess that's probably why I'm still chasing that down instead of making all sorts of fun cigar box guitars type things, which would be less demanding. But yeah, there it is. I think it'd be really cool if I had some kind of thing that snapped into here, maybe like a synthesizer. I might slide into here, or some kind of synth. So if I ever start playing bass again, I could have a little keyboard or something in there. I don't know. If you support me on Patreon, you get early access to a lot of this stuff. You get some behind-the-scenes stuff. And it helps me take the time to pursue this ridiculousness for your entertainment and for mine. Okay. Thank you very much for watching, and be good.